Well, good day, my friends. We are here in Smet, and this is where the Ingalls family is buried. But they have a lot of history here because this is where they ended up settling in Smet for the last time. So we're going to get to show you in conjunction with the museum here. They're nice enough to work with us. So if you want to look up any more, look on discoverlaura.org. But we're going to get to show you a little bit of the history around here. It's cool. They have museum, a house that Laura lived in, the Surveyor's house that they moved into when they came to town. This should be a lot of fun. This is a big part of the Ingalls history. Can't wait to get to look around, find out. There is the beautiful Laura Ingalls Wilder, and here is Jack.
It's just a question. Some of the books were written right here.
Wow, that's amazing. Being at the, getting to see where Laura wrote her books, I was just kind of wondering about that, where Rose's, all of her stuff as far as the writing material. So this is beautiful to see. Because isn't she the one that, talked Laura into start writing her books?
Very definitely.
So, wow. Without this, we have no Laura Ingalls Wilder and Little House books.
And she commissioned her handyman to make this desk custom for her. So if it looks like it was handmade for her under her specifications.
She probably was used to that, having Almanzo being her father and then making everything in their home for her mother. That's amazing. So it says, as opposed to her mother, Rose liked to type everything, and her mother loved to handwrite. Some of Laura's handwritten manuscripts were typed out right at this desk. Wow. Of course, Rose was born here.
I'm good, baby.
They have a diagram here that's kind of interesting because it shows on this side when Rose started writing and for how long she wrote. And on the other side is Laura. And they pretty much, right after Rose starts writing, Laura starts writing. And they continue writing all the way down until about the same time. Now, I kind of wonder, and I always just speculated this, they were very close because I believe it was when they were living here that Almanzo and Laura had a little boy that they lost. So they would have had a very close family, being Rose being their only child that survived. These are some of the belongings of both Laura and Rose. Rose's eyeglasses. What's amazing is that if you're a Little House fan or a Laura fan, so far Katie and I have went to several of the museums and they're all done a little differently, but they all are done very well. I haven't been to one that I was disappointed with. Oh, it says the fur babies. Laura and Rose's fur babies pictured here. Rose with Pepe and brothers, their dog tags. So that would have been her Jack. And some of Rose's cigarette holders and matches, cigarette case. This is neat. They have a diagram of Rose's travels, and you can see that, they all start over here and she lived here and everything, but she made her way all over the world. And what's interesting is that Rose actually was going to travel again across country or across the world before she died and ended up passing away the night before she took off. And then down on the other end of all the memorabilia, they have Laura's travels. And hers are strictly United States. But you can see she even made it down to Florida. But she was all over the place. All the homes. Here's Laura's sewing kit. And this is some of Rose's jewelry. That man with the beard right there is the real Charles Ingalls. Over here is the marriage announcement for Rose. Right there. It says Rose Wilder married Claire Gillette Lane, 1909 in California. Although Laura and Almanzo did not attend the wedding, they sent out an announcement to friends and family. And then these are all letters that right here that Rose wrote to Laura saying, you have to write your books, you have to write your stories. It says, shortly after the miscarriage of her son, Rose visits Laura in Mansfield in 1909. It's during that period that it seems the two have a serious conversation about writing. So Laura began writing for the Missouri Ruralist in 1910. That is so cool that they have the actual letters. That's the other thing. You go to the museums and they all have something a little different as far as memorabilia, so you can't see everything in one place. Now this says that as a young girl, Grace Ingalls started writing a diary, and it was in the exercises book. She wrote about her life, the family, and the weather. Covered the years 1887 to 1893, and it said it was discovered among the papers of Carrie's stepdaughter Mary following her death. That's neat. That's Laura's teaching certificate. Certify that Miss Laura Ingalls is found competent to give instruction in reading, orthography, writing, arithmetic, English, grammar, and geography. And below that is the announcement that Almanzo and Laura were married. It says at the residence of the officiating clergyman, Reverend E. Brown, on August 25th, 1885, Mr. Almanzo J. Wilder and Miss Laura Ingalls, both of Smet. So this is a tribute to Garth Williams, who illustrated Laura's books. It says he was contracted in 1947 to reimagine her stories, and they have some of the original drawing pages. It's so cool to see. So for this tour, I won't be able to, film the whole tour. I'll be able to show you some photos and kind of tell you some stories. But, obviously the main idea is to always come see it for yourself. I just want to, kind of show you what you're missing out on if you can't get here.
For about 6 months, so we're going to go there first.
It's the Surveyor's house.
Yes.
Family.
Okay, if you just want to close that inner door for me, there's a room behind it. So, everything's in there. Okay. Well, this is actually the Surveyor's house that she talks about on the shores of Silver Lake.
That's their bedroom, I'm guessing.
Mm-hmm. Yep. She's got a sister already, Mary. Mary's 2 years older than Laura. And as long as you farm it for 5 years, all you have to do is pay for a registration fee. And that out here works out to $14. So out here, you could get 160 acres of land for $14. He wants to take advantage of that, just like thousands of other people. And he packs everybody up in a wagon. They're going to spend 6 months traveling all the way down to Independence, Kansas. Now, it's not called Independence, Kansas. At that time, it's just called Indian Territory. It's a crop that's going to pay off his house and set them up really nicely for the winter. And unfortunately, the locusts come out and destroy his hopes and dreams. It's a locust swarm, huge. Some people say it was the largest one in American history. Just destroyed thousands and thousands of acres of land, and that destroyed his crop. So he's got to go look for work. He goes somewhere, in here somewhere, with a friend of his, Mr. Stedman, and they go to look for work on other farms to make some money. Sure, Charles reasoned that it was steady income, and that sounded pretty good at the time, so he agrees. They both go back to Walnut Grove, collect their families. Before they leave there, they're going to have the birth of a little son, little Charles Frederick. And I just suddenly realized I totally forgot Carrie. She's born down here in Independence. Sorry, Carrie. And along the way, they stop here in Troy, Minnesota, to visit his brother Peter for the winter. And unfortunately, that's also where little Charles Frederick gets deathly ill, and he passes away suddenly. So they have to leave him out there in Troy. They carry on to Burr Oak in the spring. And when they get there, they find out that this hotel was not all I thought it was going to be. After all, form of spinal meningitis, they think right now that that's probably the cause of it, that the sickness spurred that. She had very high fevers. She's going to consistently lose her sight from here on out. So the family's had some really bad luck over the last 3-4 years. So they go back to Troy that winter to spend with Peter again, and that's where we pick up in this book. This is where Aunt Docia comes to Charles and tells him, and that Aunt Docia is, by the way, Charles's sister, and she comes to tell him, I found you a job. It's working for the Chicago Northwestern Railroad, and they need a timekeeper for the railroad, but the trick is you got to start right away because they're moving fast. Well, the girls aren't well enough to travel. He decides to take the job anyway because it pays him $50 a month. He takes it, starts work with the railroad, and he's going to start that in the spring of 1879. Leaves the girls behind there on the farm. Comes out here to this part of the country, right around the end of June, first part of July of 1879. And that's where this house would have been. This is actually called a section house. It was dropped here by the railroad. And what they do is they drop one of these along the tracks every place they put a town, so that when railroad workers come into town, they have a place to stay and they don't have to rent a hotel room. So at the time, this was the manager's office, and it was located just about a mile outside the window here, right about just south of the railroad tracks that cross there. Charles is working in and living out of a little shanty just next door, and he's the guy who assigns everybody's paycheck and runs the little company store. So people buy things from Charles. When they got here, Laura says 100 times, manuscripts and letters, there's no trees out here as far as you could see. They're afraid. The house is made out of wood, and there's thousands of people coming across to get their own claims, going to Oregon, they're staying here, and they're afraid they leave it alone for the winter, it's going to be gone. So they ask him to stay here and watch it, and they give him free rent as compensation, so he says sure, and they move in here on December 1st of 1879. They're going to spend the winter in here. Laura talked her father into letting her come into the house first while the rest of them were packing up the house. She comes right through this door, right over here. That was the outside door at one time. And she goes into this room first. This would have been filled with barrels of coal and tools and storage and whatever else they kept in there. This was the living area in here. She comes in here next, and she goes over to that door first. That was the manager's office. They're going to turn that into a bedroom for Charles and Carolyn. And Charles is going to make a little bed on the floor there out of a shipping crate for baby Grace to lay in. Oh, this is like a little mansion on the prairie. It's filled with food. Railroad people left it all here. They don't have to take it back with them. Minus some duck. Charles went out and shot a duck for dinner there too. What do you think their favorite food on the table there was?
Peaches. The peaches probably. Or like dessert.
The crackers.
It's the crackers. Yeah. Because it's the only thing on the table that's store-bought. We put Mary's chair over here because they set up Mary's chair between the window and the stove. Couldn't put it here. There's a doorway there. So this is how it was set up. No, we just don't know whether the table was on that side or that side or over there. But by the time they move in here, most of the railroad people have left. And so that leaves the Ingalls family, the only residing family that stays here through that winter. They're the founding members of our town.
Wow.
Charles is considered today to be our patriarch of our town. That is until December. Actually, on Christmas Eve, they get some guests. It's Mr. and Mrs. Boast. And Mr. and Mrs. Boast have just come from back east. He went to go pick her up. He met him on the railroad. He was actually working with Charles that summer and bought a claim on the other side of Silver Lake. Doesn't want to be out there by himself, so he moves in next door so they have company. And Mrs. Boast is going to be in here telling the girls all kinds of stories about back east. And she says, well, anybody back east has a whatnot shelf, and you got to have a whatnot shelf or you're nobody. So Charles quickly fashions one out of some scrap lumber here. And she talks about it in the book, sitting right around the fireplace right here, cutting out little paper designs to put on the edges of the shelf. You know, you've been out here for 6 or 7 months now, and you have not filed for a claim on land. If you wait until summer, you're not going to find any, or you're not going to be able to, because there's too many people moving in trying to find their own $14 claim. So he says, get out there and go find your claim. Now we think he got the opportunity probably around the end of December, first part of January. It's now 1880, and that's when Laura and Carrie are out skating on Silver Lake in the evening. It's something my parents would never let me do. But anyway, and they get scared off the lake by a wolf. And Charles goes out to hunt the wolf down. Says he followed the tracks south of town, and he doesn't find the wolf, but he does find a nice little piece of land down there. It's what we call the homestead today. In the meantime, Carolyn and Mrs. Bose decide to take the opportunity to make some money, so they open this up as a boarding house. So they charge 50 cents a night for travelers coming through, 25 cents a meal, and by the time Charles comes back at the end of February, Ma's made 15 bucks.
What? Paid for the land.
Yep. This is exactly what I was just going to say. She technically paid for the claim. She's never going to let him forget it at this point. That's a recreation of what they were doing. Independence.
So now the tour is going to take us back here and we get to see her statue. When they said Laura entered from the side door, this is where she entered from the very first time. You can see the water pump here, and then that's de Smet's first school. And it says attended by Laura and Carrie Ingalls from 1880 to 1881. And look over here.
You can come in, close that door.
I was just thinking something. Yeah, lovely, right?
It's from the long winter. Laura talking about this school.
Okay, well, this is the first school in Smet. It is not in its original location. It used to be behind basically the Ingalls house that we'll go to after this. It was brought here as part of the museum in the 70s. But this is the first school in town. Was built in 1880, and Laura and Carrie are going to start going to school here in October of 1880. According to Laura, she sat by the stove, which was right here. This is where the stove was. And she sat between the window. And we know that the girls' side, because this is a segregated classroom, was this side. So Laura sat right here somewhere. And Carrie sat up here. Fresh pine wood. They had just finished building it when she moved in. And you can see some of that original pine wood right here. She talks about it in Little Town on the Prairie. Plays and spelling bees and everything else that she calls literaries on Friday nights. So Friday night at 7 p.m. this is the place to be. It was right in here.
This is showing how bad the snowstorm was the year that they were here.
Get the kids to safety, so they have them hold hands and they go out the door. And Mrs. Garland almost goes the wrong way. And the little shanty that Charles has created out there for them to live in, it's a little 8x10 shanty with tar paper walls and a blanket for a door. And they went through a 3-day blizzard in that. Talks about getting up in the morning and having to scrape the snow off the blankets before they could start the fire. After it's all over, Charles goes to this little building right here. This is the Fuller's Hardware store. They talk about that in the book several times. And that's where all the guys go to get their news and their gossip. So he goes to town to find out how things went. And that's where Laura says he learned that from a Native American while he's downtown that it was going to be a really bad winter. It happens every 8 or 9 years, and so you better be prepared. Well, Charles is kind of prepared. He's built himself a little store on Main Street. This is that store. Okay. And so he moves the family off the homestead into this. This is the setting of the long winter. This is what she talks about in the book all the time here. They're going to sit in that store for a good 5 months because the snow is going to start a couple of weeks after they move into this, and it's not going to stop until the end of April the next year. This incident happened right over there in that corner. So yes, there's a lot of mentions of this building in her books. This is also going to be, I forget the incident in the book, but this is where Almanzo starts becoming interested in Laura. So in 1882, she's going to graduate from this room. She's had 2 other teachers in the meantime. She had Eliza Jane Wilder the second year, her future sister-in-law. There's a picture of her up there. And the third teacher is Mr. Owen. And Mr. Owen graduates here in December. And it's actually Mr. Boast, who knows the commissioner, and he's got a whole bunch of cousins living out about 12 miles this way who need a teacher out there. And so he recommends her, and the school commissioner gives her a teaching certificate, and she's going to start teaching in the spring of 1884.
He just said even the blue paint in here is original. And that was Laura's teacher, Eliza Jane Wilder, Almanzo's sister. Now let's go see where Laura was a teacher. Right over here. But check this out. The wagon. They actually have a covered wagon. Prairie schooner.
By the way, that statue is 4'11". That's actual size.
The Brewster School.
And the Brewsters live about 12 miles that direction over there. And she donates the salary that she gets to help with Mary's education. Mary won a scholarship from the governor of South Dakota in 1882, and she started school there in 1883, and she's going to spend 7 years out there in Vinton, Iowa, in a school for the blind. So they call it a college, but it's really the same schooling that everybody else is getting, just for blind kids. So she's going to be gone out of Smet for a long time. But Laura teaches here for about 5 months. She has to live with the Brewsters while she's doing it. She really doesn't like them. Mrs. Brewster is suffering from prairie fever. That's severe depression.
And other things by that story.
Yes.
Yeah.
She's very upset with being out here. She doesn't like it. She takes it out on her husband, who brought her out here. She used to have a nice house on the East Coast with shopping centers and plays and friends and amenities. And he brought her out here to live in something very much like this, out in the middle of a prairie, not even close to town. So she's not very happy with him. And even at one point, she chases him around the house with a knife.
Yeah, it shows in that picture.
She doesn't treat Laura very well either. And this is where Almanzo's going to step up his game, and he's going to go and pick her up on Friday nights and bring her back to her family here on the weekends, and then take her back so she's to school on Monday. And all along he assures her and her father he's not courting her, he's just being a friend. They become the Brewsters.
Gotcha.
Because these people are still alive when those books come out, so I'm sure they weren't very happy.
Yep.
But she also changes other names. We asked about Nellie. Nellie is a composite of 3 different people. There was Nellie Owen. She lived in Walnut Grove, was the merchant in town's daughter, and they did have a store there. They eventually moved, I thought they moved here and moved up the street and become farmers later, so they don't have a store in town. But in town here, she has Stella Gilbert, David Gilbert's sister, and she also has David and Genevieve Masters. And the Masters family are also people that follow them, cousins of the people who followed them from Walnut Grove too. And they thought it would be easier for kids to understand, rather than having all these separate people, that we condense this down into one person. And so Nellie Olson is born.
Now we're over at the Ingalls house that Pa built.
Okay, welcome to the Ingalls home. Okay, any book people remember who Mary Powers is?
Wasn't that Rachel's best friend?
Yes, she lived right there.
Oh, what house? The basketball one?
The one with the brown white trim. And
Oh, right here.
Okay, that one.
That was her best friend, Mary Powers' house.
Oh yeah,
That's the original.
that's it. That's the original house. A house they're going to live in after they've lived on the homestead for 7 years. They come into town and they live here. Charles built this house in 1887. The only part they moved into, though, or the only part that existed back in 1887, was this. It took them another 5 years to add on the rest of the rooms and the other rooms upstairs. And this is where they moved in. They moved in Christmas Eve of 1887. It's actually called a Daze.
Wow.
It's kind of both.
How cool. I don't know how you can read the books or watch the show and not become a huge Charles Ingalls fan, so it's so cool to see. The Old Testament right here. Wow. There's their insulation, it says, on that newspaper. Completed by Paul in the fall of 1887. Wow. He built these cupboards. Wow.
Like I said, built the house in 1887. He probably decided at this point in his life, he's in his mid-50s by now, and he probably decided that farming is pretty hard, and he's being paid more as a carpenter anyway, and he's probably going to make more money doing that anyhow at this point. So he's not like they portray him in the TV show. The TV show has him walking around town shirtless all the time and crying. No. Charles is actually one of the first sheriffs in town. He's also one of the first justices of the peace. At one point, he's even mayor for a little bit. So, he's quite the guy. He's very socially active in the town and helping decide how it's going to look and function. And like I said, he's one heck of a carpenter. He helped build the church that's diagonal out the window. You'll be able to see it there when we go upstairs. You'll be able to see the church that he helps build. The family's going to go to church there for some 25 years. That's directly across the street of where the school would have been. So the school would have been right behind the house over here on the next block over. That's where it came from. Anyway, he's also unfortunately the first person who passes away. He passes away in 1902 at the age of 66 of heart failure right in that room. Anyway, that leaves a problem for Carolyn. Carolyn has to become the breadwinner of the family, and I should say that everybody lives in the house here except for Laura.
So Pa died in here.
They move in here. This is 1887. She's been married for 2 years already to Almanza. She's living a couple miles up the street. Well, Carolyn decides to do what she did in the Surveyor's house, and she rents out the upstairs room, short and long-term rentals. She also has a huge garden. This brick building that's right next door to us here wasn't there. It was all a huge garden all the way around the house. There was fruit trees and all kinds of fruits and vegetables in her garden.
Wow, she lasted 22 years.
78. So, that leaves a bigger problem, for the only person left at the time living in the house is Mary. Mary graduated in 1889 from her schooling, and she comes here to live. And the TV show portrays her going off to start a blind school, get married, have a child, all kinds of stuff. Unfortunately, no. Mary lives here for the rest of her life. She doesn't get married, and she doesn't have any children. She's very talented when she gets out of school, though, so it's really a shame that none of that did happen, because she could do it. The decision's made for Mary to go with Carrie out to Keystone, where she's living at that time, pack her up and take her out to Keystone. Well, when they get to Keystone, everything's fine. She gets to relax for a year. She's with her sister. She doesn't have to worry about bills and how to put food on the table, and everything's great, except next year she has multiple strokes. Leaves her completely incapacitated in 1928, and she passes away in June. That's Grace. Last time you saw her, she was 2.
Yeah.
She's 21 here. She becomes a teacher, just like Laura, in a little town called Manchester, about 5 miles out the window this way. And she meets this guy. This is Nathan Dow. Yes, he is related to Fred Dow. This is his nephew. He's working his father's farm out there. They've got quite a bit of land out in Manchester, and she falls in love with him. They get married right in this room in 1901.
Wow.
She decides, I'm going to finally sell it, because at this point in her life, she's about 70, in her mid-70s, and she says, I'm never coming back to Smet, and apparently none of my other siblings are either. So she breaks down and sells it, and she sells it to a couple called Fergusons. And Fergusons start writing her letters saying, come get your stuff, which she had packed up the rest of the items here in the house and put them in an upstairs bedroom and left.
When she was 70, she couldn't carry stuff.
Yes. Well, they wanted to use the house they just bought,
Yeah.
and so they said, please come get it. Well, she never comes back. because in I think it was June of 1946, she has a sudden heart attack and she passes away.
Oh, Carrie passed away.
So, the Fergusons, who either don't know anything about Laura or don't care, because Laura's published at this point, they take everything out of the upstairs bedroom and they put it out on the front lawn right in front of us here, and they tell the neighbors, come get whatever you want. So, the only thing that's saved out of that pile is some personal items, some of the things that you'll find even here in the house, because some of those people actually are the ones who started this museum, so
Wow.
they donated it back. But that's why we have no furniture left, because at that point it had either been all farmed out to one of the girls or the neighbors. So it's all gone. And people start writing her letters, which, by the way, she answers every fan letter that's ever written to her. But people start asking, why didn't you write more books? And she'll write back simply one of two things. She'll say, either, hey, I'm in my mid-70s now. I'd like to enjoy my golden years, and I don't have to work. And, Uncle Sam takes too much of my money anyway. Now, Manzo passes away in 1949 at the age of 90. Worked all the way up to the last couple months on this farm. And Laura follows him in 1957, also at the age of 90. Rose takes over the estate, and she will fiercely protect her mother's work. She'll publish the next book in the series because she finds her mother's diary in her desk, publishes that. It's called On the Way Home. And she'll help set up the museums. She even donates the money here in Smet to pay for the headstones out on the cemetery, because up to that time they were unmarked, except for Charles.
Here's another look into the room that Pa passed away in, Charles Ingalls. And I just was showing you that because there's a stairwell that goes upstairs. So in this bedroom, it looks like this would have been Mary's bedroom. And when we saw the Old Testament, it's embossed. So it was her Braille Old Testament. And then if you look in the cabinet in here, you can actually open the drawers and they have some of the personal belongings. Carrie's jewelry box, who Carrie ended up inheriting the house. Here's Mary's jewelry. Right here we have the New General History book. Original letters in here. So we're back to where the kitchen was, and it says the room you're now in was the dining room. Notice the wide wood floor, which was the only one which could be saved. So this is the original floor, where you get to walk on it. And he built all of this. So that says Pa created these cupboards for Ma's use. And she survived over 2 decades after he passed away. And you can see 2 rings right there, so you would have been able to pull the door open and go down. Wow, so cool to see this place. So I thought we weren't going upstairs, but I guess we are. We just have to go around to get up there. So we get to see the bedrooms up here. So here's Carrie's bedroom, or at least what they have labeled as Carrie's. I mean, it's a pretty big house. And then they recreate, well, they said this was actually Rose's office for a time. And there are those steps that we were looking at.
I mean, this was incredible. It's an amazing slice of history. The tour was fantastic. So much information. The area is beautiful. You can definitely see how the family could be happy here. Amazing artifacts that really belong to the family. It was so cool to see. I mean, this is 100 and some years old, so it's great that it's still here.
One of the things I loved about this tour, they did something that like most of the other museums don't do, which is they included the whole history of really the family and how they got here, which I loved. But our tour's not over. We are actually going to go with a tour guide for another video out to the cemetery, but you and I are going to go see where Laura and Almanzo rented a home, and then we're going to see Pa's church.
Yep, he built that church with his hands.
So this house right here on the corner has some history, because what ended up happening was, because of Almanzo having the stroke and everything, his parents told him, hey, you guys should move to Florida. And they moved to Florida and didn't enjoy it. They didn't like the people, they didn't like where they were living. So they came back to Smet and they lived here for a couple of years before eventually going off to their forever home in Mansfield. So right over here we have the Christian and Missionary Alliance Church, and they have a historical plaque that tells the Ingalls involvement here. They were the original charter members. So here it was called the First Congregational Church when it sat here. And it says the church was officially organized on June 20th, 1880. 1 year later, a congregational meeting proposed financing for a church building. Money was raised through contributions and pledges. Construction of the church began in 1882. Pa Ingalls assisted in the construction. The original structure was a typical small church of its time, 28 foot by 48 in size, with the entrance at the north end. And it says the very first service was held. The first congregational church was August 30th of 1882, with the Reverend Edward Brown as the minister. Among the 8 charter members were Charles and Caroline and Mary Ingalls. So if you look at the church from the side, now you can see where the original part of the church that he built was. It was this section right here. And they've added on to it. All right, my friends, I hope you enjoyed our tour today. Katie and I had a blast. This museum is maybe one of the best, one of the top Laura Ingalls Wilder experiences that we've ever had. So definitely come check it out. Thank you all for watching. Have a great night and goodbye.